I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to the rescheduled and hopefully somewhat abbreviated meeting this evening. All members are present. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion.
By Lee, second. By Stacy. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. On our consent agenda this evening, we have the check wire transfer and disbursement summary, approval of the school board minutes from May 9th and May 23rd, donations of $990 from the Mid-Wacaton Sioux community for expansion of second step curriculum at Hidden Oaks, and $1,000 from the Mid-Wacaton Sioux for the purchase of smart response and interactive system at Hidden Oaks. Resignations as presented. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? By Tom, second.
Second.
By Todd. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Now is the point in time in our meeting where we open up the floor for an open forum. Residents of our district can feel free to address the board on any item not on the agenda this evening. Is there anyone that would like to address the board tonight? Seeing none. We'll move on to personnel. Candidates for employment. Matt.
Right. I would like to recommend the following candidates for employment and seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the candidates for employment as presented?
So moved.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Lee. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Approval of the Jeffers Pond Elementary principal. Is that you?
On behalf of the Jeffers Pond Hiring Committee, I would like to recommend the appointment. It is my pleasure to recommend the appointment of Caroline Warner as the new principal of Jeffers Pond Elementary, and I'm seeking board approval.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of Caroline Warner as the Jeffers Pond principal?
I'll move.
By Todd, second.
I'll second.
By Lee. Any questions or comments? Sue Ann.
I would just say that we had a very strong field of 82 candidates for this position. The committee worked diligently to go through all of those applications, narrowed it down to 6 semifinalists and then to 2 finalists. And it was with great excitement that we were able to appoint or ask you to appoint Caroline Warner as our next principal at Jeffers Pond Elementary. We would hope that we'd have a very smooth transition and that it would be a seamless one for our district and for the school. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it was a very good process that we went through. I'm sure Caroline would be the first to say it was probably grueling, but it comes with the consensus recommendation from the committee. I think when we walked out, everyone agreed that we had the right candidate for the right role. Caroline, did you want to say anything? We'll catch you unrehearsed.
Oh, my daughter kept asking, when do you get to say something? Just wanted to say thank you so much, definitely to the committee, to the board, to Dr. Gruber for the process and certainly my growth through that process. And I am so looking forward to the opportunity to get back into the elementary school and certainly take my experiences from the middle and blend those together. And excited. I've already met with Cindy a couple times, been able to go over to Jeffers to meet with some students. We'll be a part of the all-school meeting coming up next week. So excited for those opportunities and just thank you for that opportunity and looking forward to starting next year.
Would you like to introduce your family?
Yeah, my husband, David Warner, who's a Parley graduate, and my daughter, Maya, who's 4.5.
Maybe Maya wants to come up and say hello.
But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Congratulations, Carolyn. Request for additional staffing. Matt?
And tonight we have 2 requests for additional staffing, and I'll just go into very briefly the background for the positions being requested. First of all, we have a number of supervisory positions that are needed at the high school, and we knew that we would need these positions when we were moving to the 6th period day, because previously our teaching staff had an extra period in their day that was a supervisory period, and we knew that we would be losing that in the transition, and it was budgeted for. So these are the positions to take over those responsibilities that were covered by teachers previously. And so those are the supervisory positions at the high school. And then second, we have a request for a additional .5 secretary to handle targeted services at the District Services Center, and it is the vision that this position would be paired with our current halftime Mars person, and the need for this arose when we took back our programming from Carver Scott as a transition. This a clerical position was budgeted for at the time, but we wanted to make sure that we had a year under our belts and that we knew that the money would be there, and so that's why this position is coming forward now.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the additional staffing request as presented? So moved. By Tom, second.
Second.
By Stacy. Any questions or discussion?
I just got some clarification questions. With the lunchroom supervisors, those will be people that will be hired separately. Will the principals or assistant principals still be involved in that supervision? Okay. Then my other question is, with in-school suspension supervisor, I guess I was under the impression that was a counselor or an assistant principal that did that. It is a teacher that's always done that? Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yes, Mike.
We don't have ISS every day, do we?
Pretty much, and with the Lawson Study Hall, we're also, we do, we're trying to have less students out of school,
Okay.
in school where they're doing work.
Okay.
And we're also looking at that if it proves out right now with the transition from teacher to teacher, hour. We're losing study halls in some quiet places for students who require quiet testing rooms, so we're looking at wrapping a lot of that together for some efficiencies.
Okay.
But I would say pretty much every day we have someone in ISS.
Must be a little different than our days. And so with respect to that, then I'm assuming these positions are only on student contact days?
Yes.
Okay.
And that position, that ISS position, as you heard from Dave, is a flexible position. So depending on what the needs are of that day, of that student, that might be a nice place for them to take a time to rethink or to do their work or whatever is needed during that time period.
Yes, Stacy.
Are the lunchroom supervisors, they would just be for lunchroom time, right?
They would be 3-hour-a-day positions to cover the lunchroom.
Okay, and just a couple of clarifying questions. I think you touched on these, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear. The positions that we're proposing for the high school, and I'm assuming there'll be some coming for the middle school as well at some point in time.
That's correct.
Those were already included when we talked about the $1.2 to $1.4 million savings.
That's correct. It was planned in the initial reduction. Correct.
And then the same thing with the targeted services secretary. I think I understood that you said part of the savings included the expense of an additional halftime secretary was already taken out of the savings from moving the programs.
That's
back here.
correct, and it falls within the revenues coming in from targeted services, and so it's not an additional unplanned for burden.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. We have no old business this evening. New business, we'll talk about health insurance options. Julie.
We've had several meetings with our insurance committee and also with the entire board discussing the district moving to self-insurance. We've had a lot of data that's been given to these groups and information that I think everyone understands that the district really moving forward could benefit from more information, better information going forward, and possibly saving money in the long run and controlling some of our health insurance costs, especially those fixed costs for the district, administrative fees, and other fees that are assessed to us through either Blue Cross Blue Shield or the co-op, which would now become our savings on our end, which would help build a fund balance for the district to sustain long-term that our health insurance pool. And if you remember, we have talked about this in the past. Our health insurance would be a separate account for the district. That money would always stay in that account. And moving forward, instead of our premiums being sent to Blue Cross Blue Shield, now they would go into that account, and we would pay out those claims through that account. And also our catastrophic, we would have premiums for a catastrophic plan, anything over $200,000. The savings is about $800,000. It's about 10% of our total premium costs. Our premiums are almost $8 million a year, both employer and employee paid. And so the savings overall would be about $800,000. Last board meeting, we've had some questions by the board as to what those increases were, and I did receive some information concerning prior years' costs and those increases. In 2009, the district had claims. When we talk about claims, we talk about what we expect our claims to be. Just like when we're self-insured, if we decide to go that route, we would determine what our claims would be, and then at the end of the year, we would look at actual claims, what actually happens to our claims versus what we predicted to happen. In 2009, when looking back, our claims experience was predicted to be just about $6 million, and our actual claims were 5.1. And so Blue Cross Blue Shield made about $900,000 on the district that year, just in that claims. And that year we received a 5.5% increase. And so going forward, that's just an example, but going forward, those savings would now stay in that account moving forward. And then the district would determine what those increases were and how to use that money, best to use that money. Over the years, our increases, since 2004, we haven't had any increases that were zero. They've all been anywhere between 3.2% up to the maximum was 13.3. And so moving forward, what our recommendation is on behalf of the insurance committee is that the district look at self-funding in the future. Other questions?
This would begin with July 1st.
It would begin with July 1st. We've had some preliminary discussions to make sure that we could handle the enrollments. We've been told that they would bring out the troops from Preferred One to make sure that we would get our enrollment completed next week if this were to pass tonight.
Any questions for Julie?
Yeah, Julie, I think I was one that had made the request for that information. Were there any years in particular where we actually spent out more than what the estimate had been? I mean, that was the main reason for that was, to make sure that we've not had that type of an experience significantly.
The highest we've ever had was in 2007, and that was a 13.3% increase. And I don't have the specific detail, but based on this detail I have for the past 3 years, I would think that we were pretty close. Our claims, what we predicted our claims would be, what our claims were even. They weren't over above that, but they were even.
So have we ever gone over, in the records that you've been able to locate, have we gone over, and yet our premiums have gone down?
No. Premiums have never gone down since 2004. In fact, we haven't had a zero year. This next year is the first year that we would have predicted to have a zero.
But have we had a year where actual claims exceeded expected claims?
In 2007 would have been the closest year. It would have been even.
But not over.
Or I don't have the specific data for that, but based on the percentages of increases, when we saved $900,000 of our claims experience, and we had a 5.5%, if I translate that out, we would have been really close to being even. It could have been slightly over or slightly under, but it would have been close. And we had a 13.3% that year.
Aren't we getting the information from the co-op? Are they not being as transparent with us as we should
When I
expect?
requested information, I got the past 3 years, which was the most current that they had available on the turnaround that I requested. I didn't get any information prior to that. All I got, I received them with the increases since 2004. But I got the most detail for the past 3 years, including the current one.
If there's nobody else, no, Rich.
Julie,
Yes.
is this, now, when we go with self-insurance, is this a year-by-year deal? Or is there an extended contract or whatever we have to
It could
explain
be
that?
a year to year. We always could look at going to fully insured again. The district always has that option of doing that. There is nothing that binds us to staying to self-insured.
Okay. And then I know we've had meetings with some of the staff members here. Have you gotten any feedback from them on, I know there were some specific questions about coverage and things like that.
We have had a lot of questions, as we've had even with the board and with our insurance committee. So yes, we've had questions. The nice part about being self-insured is that we decide what our plan is. And so going forward with Blue Cross, moving from Blue Cross Blue Shield to Health Partners, to Preferred One, it's, we design the plan. So if we want our plan to be exactly as it was under Blue Cross Blue Shield, that's what the plan will be, because we make those decisions as to what the plan is. So instead of being offered a plan from Blue Cross Blue Shield, we actually design it ourselves. And so what we've done is match the plans that we currently have to not have a change in our aggregate value.
Because one of the things I like about this program is the amount of data we get back from Preferred
Absolutely.
One. And have you thought about a regular scheduled update to the board, yearly or twice a year or something like that?
We would like to start with monthly insurance committee meetings and updates to the board, absolutely, to the finance committee. We would definitely be looking at that. And moving forward, the nice part about it is that we are getting a lot more information, more data, gives us better opportunities to make better decisions. And so when we look at that and people start to understand how we use our health insurance, it really empowers our staff to maybe use it a little more wisely to reduce our costs. Yes.
Just a couple of questions. So just to follow up on Rich, we've designed a plan so there's really effectively no change to benefit. Will we have service level agreements in place such that we can assure our staff that prescription drugs or claims settlement will all happen in a timely manner?
Yes. All of our claims will be worked through Preferred One, they'll be our third-party administrator, and they will know our plan inside and out. They've already been working on it preliminarily in case we were to make that move. And so they are helping us to make sure that they are matching our plan specifically word for word, so that moving forward we can say that yes. And if there is an issue, we know that we can work it out, because being self-insured, we can say, well, if this is how it was paid through Blue Cross Blue Shield, that's how we want it paid. And so we can say that. We wouldn't be able to say that if we moved from fully insured Blue Cross Blue Shield to a fully insured Medica, per se. You wouldn't necessarily, because those plans wouldn't match. But because we are being self-insured, we decide what those plans are, so we decide what gets paid.
And a significant part of the savings, as we talked about, was just in administrative costs. So it doesn't go to the claims piece, it goes to how much we pay somebody to administer the program?
Correct. In the past, we paid, I think we've talked about this, a little over $40 to the co-op and to Blue Cross Blue Shield to administer single claims as a per month charge to us for anybody on a single policy. And then it's almost $100 for anybody on a family policy per month. And so those costs are over $500,000 a year just for that piece of it. And moving now to preferred one, those claims are $25, whether it's a family or a single policy. So that's about a cost of about $190,000. So we're saving about $350,000 right there in administrative costs. And that money would be then in that account again to be used for future use for our health insurance.
Yes, Stacy?
And so if we decide to go this route with self-insured, is there any timeline as far as getting out from the co-op or penalized or anything like that?
Because they were out for bid this year, and we received all of our data late, all those timelines are voided because we didn't receive all our information. We should have had 90 days to review everything. We received our information within 60 days. So we needed some additional time to make decisions.
Okay, and just to clarify, on the insurance committee, so if, because I think coverage is, obviously, keeping the same coverage is a big deal.
Yes, it is.
And so if there were issues, I mean, would it come through the insurance committee as in sense, I mean, or how would we change the plan to tweak the plan to have it be equivalent to what we have now? I mean, where does the recommendations come in or from? Oh.
What we would do is we would hopefully look to preferred one to review what we currently have in place through Blue Cross Blue Shield and compare it to what actually happened in the claim. Mm-hmm. And if there's discrepancies, then they would resolve them at that point. And we're hoping that doesn't happen. I can't guarantee that won't. You know, it's an $8 million policy overall, and so we'll have quite a few claims. However, we're going to try and be as seamless as we can and make those changes as quickly and as efficiently as we can.
And do you see, I mean, from a workload, I know this has been asked before, but a workload standpoint on the district's portion, is there anything on our portion that we're going to have to pick up the slack on, or, I mean, need
as far
staff?
as administration of the claims or anything like that, there isn't any additional work on our end. The only piece that it would be is to add that account and to reconcile that account. That would be an additional piece. However, I believe it'll make it easier on us to reconcile our liabilities when we pay out those claims in our general fund, and then we know exactly where they went and how that works, and so we would be able to cross-check that. So actually it'll be a benefit for us to be able to do that. So, but we will have it audited just like we would if everything else. It wouldn't increase our audit fees. It's not a lot different than when we added the OPEB account.
And anything, just to clarify, anything that is in this account can only be used for health?
State statutes that bind us to those.
It's not like we can move it around?
No.
Okay.
I think the one overarching concern continues to be, and with me, we've had a history of kind of under having claims fall under, and the law of averages says at some point in time we're going to have claims exceed what we expect.
Absolutely.
How do we as a district avoid effectively going bankrupt because of medical costs or excess claims?
I don't. That's a difficult question that how you worded it, because it's not that we would go bankrupt. What happens is not any different than if we were fully insured. If our claims go higher than what we anticipated, our rates would increase. If our rates were higher when we're with Blue Cross Blue Shield, our rates increased, and so we would increase our rates to cover our costs.
But we'd be paying out before, I mean, we would actually have the drain on the reserves before the premiums were collected, and I guess it's that timing where Blue Cross Blue Shield today assumes that risk. We're assuming that risk.
There is a risk, and that is the risk, is that if we were to have some catastrophic event that would happen, there is a risk, but it's such a small risk. When we looked at the total numbers of what they insure us for, it's about a $10,000 cost for us to have a reinsurance, basically, of anything over 125% of those premiums is now paid for fully by Preferred One, or a stop-loss company is what they effectively call it. And so we would be liable for anything over 125, up to 125% of those premiums. But by being able to save those fixed costs and keeping that money in that reserve and having that money available should eliminate some of that risk. Whereas that money right now just goes out the door to Blue Cross and the co-op, now that stays with us. And yes, we're assuming the risk, but we also assume the savings. So over the past 7 or 8 years, except for 1 year, they've been doing a pretty good job of making money on those claims. And so I'd like to see that be something that the district being able to do some cost avoidance in the future if we could have some 0 years of rate increases by saving those funds.
And you said the insurance company supports this recommendation?
The insurance committee,
Or committee, yes.
yes.
Any other
And-
questions?
I guess.
Sorry.
And other districts that currently do this, that are self-insured?
Bloomington, Minnetonka, Wayzata, Robbinsdale, those are a few of the bigger districts that I know that are on self-insured. Anoka, I believe, is self-insured. A few other districts are also looking at it this year as well.
So the urgency behind tonight's action is to make sure that we've got enough time to transition by July 1, right?
That's correct. We want to give as much opportunity to our staff as we can to make sure that they're well-informed, to be able to fill out their enrollment papers and make this, and be able to receive their identification cards before July 1st. So we want to do this. That's why we had this special meeting tonight.
Yes.
And just a note that someone asked, have you met with, what are the questions? I think it was you, Rich. What are the questions of the PLSEA? Deb Johnson, Matt Mons, and Julie have met with different members of the teachers union as well as the insurance committee throughout these last couple of weeks. I think it's gone well over 11 hours of different kinds of meetings to really answer those questions and go in depth, find the answers, come back again. And so that has really been to the benefit of everyone understanding the complexity of this issue and trying to get their head around what would be the benefit to our staff if the actual policy stays exactly the same. What's going to else be different? And what we found, and I think what's intriguing to all of us, is that ability to look at the data and be able to look at it on a monthly basis to see how are we doing and what could we do differently, whether that's a wellness project or if it is looking at what the trends are of our different categories of staff. So we'll be able to make decisions on a long term based on our own data rather than having someone else do it for us to the benefit of a co-op. So even though there are liabilities, I do believe that we will benefit to the extent that we will be able to sustain this over time. And if we find that we don't like it, as the very first question was, can we get out of it? Absolutely, we can get out of it. But Preferred One has been very accommodating in trying to make sure that all the prescriptions, to their best ability, are able to transfer over, and if not, they'll help get those processes in place, so they will, and make sure that all the doctors are there for the people to have the same clinics, the same doctors, et cetera, throughout the state and pretty much the country. So
They actually have the widest nationwide network, even wider than we currently have with Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so hopefully those snowbirds that are still on our insurance, retirees, they'll be able to have really good access, even though they're living in another state, or children that are off to college.
Yes.
You know, in the past, I've used, not for every decision, but things that I think are like this on, you know, what's the weather in the air out there, on, you know, which way I should support one way or the other. And I don't know if it's to the credit of Deb and Matt and Julie, but I haven't received one email from any staff saying no way in the world. And I thought we'd get a huge influx. Now maybe some others have, but so I'm sure that there's still some trepidation, but, you know, me personally, I haven't heard from anybody, and so it's either the silent majority out there is fearful to say anything, or maybe, again, the message has gotten out that there's going to be, a seamless transition. So, whatever services you're entitled to right now will continue on July 1st, and also the potential upside that I think, I believe probably people see that down the road there may be some additional things to gain. So I will be fully supporting this tonight. I certainly agree, Eric, and that was why I asked the question before, to just make sure that we're not jumping into this with our eyes shut and there's no water in the deep end of the pool. But I think we've uncovered within the time frame that we have enough of the issues that are out there. And again, to Rich's point, if we jump in and all of a sudden we find out, oops, this wasn't so good, it's not like we're committed for 10 years or anything like this. So I think it's a good plan for us to go forward with, and I'll be supporting it tonight.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? I'm sorry, did we take a motion, Martha? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll entertain a motion to approve a move to.
I'll make the motion.
I think Mike already made it.
By Mike, second.
Second.
By Todd. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have the first reading of the budget. The preliminary budget is necessary to be passed by June 27th per state statute, and it's been our tradition to have two readings, the first one at the first meeting of June, which I guess officially is tonight.
Yes.
And so I'll let you go ahead and take that over.
Thank you. You have me for the majority of the meeting tonight, so I hope that we'll be able to tolerate that. Our 2011-12 preliminary budget, just to talk a little bit about our budget process, it started 2 years ago when we went through a 2-year budget process knowing that we weren't receiving any additional funding from the state. And so last August, the board approved moving to a 6-period day, which made adjustments to the scheduling at the middle level and high school. Also, this last reviewing our enrollment for the next year, we also know that we have a slight decline in enrollment at our elementary level. However, we do have a bubble at our middle and upper levels. So when we're looking at scheduling for next year, we also looked at our enrollment, and we had some reductions at the elementary level just simply due to our enrollment. We also offered this year an early retirement incentive utilizing the Federal Education Jobs Bill, and we had 19 teachers utilize that opportunity. One of the biggest drivers of our budget is enrollment. And looking at our enrollment, I do have the pre-kindergarten through 12th grade totals. You can see where we are in 2010-11, and we're not a whole lot different in 2011 and 12. And you can see moving forward that we start to drop off a little bit in 12-13, 13-14. We're trying to do some things educationally to improve that, and if the economy improves and the roads improve off of 169 and 494 in different areas, we definitely could see a change in this trend. We're declining. However, we have plenty of opportunities for additional building spaces, both in Prior Lake and Savage, and so those opportunities, if the economy were to turn around, definitely affect our enrollment. And so I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom. I'm really happy that we're only down overall about 4 students for 11 and 12. You can see that we're negative 50, down 50 students for 12, 13, and then there's 77, and that number grows. And so those are the ones that we're trying to make a difference in the following years.
Julie, can I just,
Yes.
So these are cumulative numbers though, right? So we would be another 50 down the next year, so to be a total of 54 from this year? Is that how I read that?
Yes.
Or? Okay.
Yes. Budget, I'm going backwards, let's see. I'm talking a little bit about our general fund. Our general fund is what drives the majority of our education. We do have flat enrollment. I'm saying flat, even though we're down a couple students. There's no change. We're basing our budget off of no change to the basic formula. As you know, our legislation has not been completed for this year. They were to be done by the 23rd of May. There has been no resolution for our education funding bill, and therefore, we're making these assumptions moving forward. No increase in our fee structures for any of our activities, events at this point. We're still anticipating a 7:30 shift for cash flow purposes for our funding. Because interest rates are so low, I'm not anticipating any increases to our interest revenue. We have not received word yet, but we are anticipating that we'll receive at least the funding that we did for our ADSYS grant for 2011 and 12, and hopefully more, but at this point, we're budgeting for what we received the current year. We do have remaining federal jobs bill dollars of about $350,000 after we've spent some of those funds for that early retirement incentive. Talking a little bit about our expenditure budgets. Again, we're basing our staffing on the 6-period day and the declining enrollment at the elementary level, the 19 teacher retirees. We're taking all that into consideration moving forward. Any contractual obligations that the district has. We are budgeting a 3% increase in our utility costs, and we are budgeting for some increases in our transportation costs for fuel. We do have a fuel clause in our contract. We have some expenses due to that ADSYS grant, so it's money in, money out. What we receive in our grant, we spend. We have categorical expenditures based on our revenue and student population. Special education funding, we're right now anticipating that it'll continue to be funded at 88%, and our excess funded at 66%. Again, that's one of the pieces that has been on the table in the past with the legislation. But we are basing our funding on those two pieces going forward. And then using, in 2011-12 is the last year that we can utilize those federal education job bills dollars, so we will definitely be utilizing those in this coming year. I want to also talk about, because we have 3 new board members this year, and this is our first opportunity of looking at a budget, I do want to talk about how we fund Fund 2, which is our food service fund. We receive revenues based on our enrollment and participation history. So when we anticipate how many students will eat lunch every year, we look at past history and then make an assumption based on that history. We also receive additional funding for those students that participate in our free and reduced lunch program. We receive kindergarten milk, additional money for kindergarten milk program, and of course our a la carte program at the high school. And we also are basing our revenue on no increase in lunch prices. For expenditures, the majority is staffing and food, of course, any contractual obligations, and we do have some utility increased costs in the food service fund. One of the things that could affect our food service in the future is federal legislation that could pass. We're thinking sometime next January. And so if those regulations affect how we can purchase food, and it could affect our participation. If they're talking about changing like the sodium levels in our food that we prepare or that we receive from commodities. And when there's a change in how food tastes, it affects students what they will want to eat. And so moving forward, that could affect our participation. One of the things that we're already doing that is in the legislation, proposed legislation, is all the fruits and vegetables. We already do that in our current food service program, so that won't change. But it could be depending on how they place those different regulations on how the food's prepared. Fund 4, community services. This is an area that mainly we receive participation fees for classes and events that is hosted by community education. We do receive some levy dollars based on our census in our district. All-day kindergarten, half of the cost of all-day kindergarten is flows through our community services fund. Early childhood family education, preschool screening, school readiness, and non-public pupil aids all flows through our community service fund. So that's why that fund is so large. So just as when you're looking at our budget as a whole, you understand sometimes where the money comes from. It's not always out of the general fund. Sometimes it flows through our food service fund, or our community services fund. For our expenditures for community services, staffing for classes, our contractual obligations that we have, utility costs also is charged through Fund 4. We have staffing for early childhood family ed, non-public pupil expenditures, school readiness, and our all-day kindergarten staffing, that half of that piece that flows to community services. Fund 6, the district voters passed a bond referendum, and we do have some remaining funds in that, and just recently the board approved to spend some of those fundings for updating our technology infrastructure in our buildings. Any remaining money that is left over after that point, those proceeds the use of those will be determined by the building committee and the school board, and that needs to be done in accordance with the original bond language. Fund 7, our debt service fund, that's used for the repayment of those bonds approved by our district taxpayers. By law, we must levy 5% over the principal and interest payments that are due each year, and those payments are made twice a year in February and August. Here is our estimated fund balances that we're looking at preliminarily through June 30th of 2012. As you can see, as we go through the general fund, that we're really striving for our fund balance, moving our fund balance to that 5% in our unassigned fund balance. One of the things later on in the agenda, we do change our descriptions for this year. We used to have designated, and now it's committed. We used to have undesignated, and now it will be called unassigned. And so as we talk about that later in the policy, we'll maybe understand those a little bit more. So I've updated that on this chart. As you can see, again, I'm not going to go through each of the areas, and I will discuss this in much further detail when we discuss it in the Finance Committee meeting on June 20th. But you can see I have a total general fund. There is a decrease, but most of that decrease is due to the federal jobs bill and spending down some of those committed funds. Is not out of the unassigned operating. Our food service is also decreasing slightly. We did not, like I said, we did not raise our fuel prices or our food prices, but we are looking at still a $325,000 fund balance at the end of 2012. And both Jean and I feel that that's a substantial amount to have for the future. Community Ed also is looking at positive fund balance. Our building fund is decreasing. We anticipate to have around $423,000 at the end of next year. However, if the building committee does decide to utilize some of those funds, that number could change throughout the year. Our debt service fund, I'm anticipating that will increase. However, depending on unpaid property taxes, that number could vary. And that is the reason that we do levy for that extra 5% in the debt service fund. And then our other internal service funds for OPEB. What happens next? Hopefully we'll have an education bill. The governor needs to call a special session. At that point, if they can come to some agreement on an education bill, then we'll be able to update our budget based on those decisions. If not, we'll use the assumptions that I presented here tonight. We will meet on June 20th at 5 o'clock to go through the detailed budgets for each of the areas, and then we need to have an approved preliminary budget by the end of June. Any questions?
Are there any questions for Julie on the preliminary budget?
I guess I do.
Yes.
Those edu funds, you said we were going to spend those down through the next year, but those are used for specific purposes? Could you refresh my memory on what those specific purposes are?
They're one-time use funds. We can only use them in 2010, 11, and 11, 12. So we received almost $2 million, the district did. Some of those funds were used to offset for this year for the early retirement incentive. And we also had some class size reduction money that the board approved last August for the purpose of reducing class sizes. So we hired additional staff. Right now, those funds are uncommitted, and that's one of the things that I'd like to discuss with the building committee, how those funds are used for next year.
Finance committee, right?
Finance, yeah.
I-
Said building.
okay. Finance committee.
As Julie said, this has not been reviewed by the Finance Committee yet. If you think of anything afterwards, feel free to contact Julie, Mike, Stacy, or I on the Finance Committee, or Dr. Gruber, so that we can have all of our questions answered by the time we have to actually approve this on June 20, or on what, June 27th?
June 27th is the next board meeting. If you have questions or don't understand something, feel free to call, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability.
Eric, can I have one?
Yeah.
In which fund then will this new insurance program?
It will be a separate fund. It'll be part of our internal service fund, but it'll be kept separately, but you'll see the totals in that.
So we'll have to approve that as part of our preliminary budget at the end of June?
Yes, we will.
Okay. And you'll have numbers then, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And I believe at this Finance Committee meeting on June 20th, you've invited the full board to attend if
Yes.
they'd like to, just to get better understanding on the insurance as well as on just the whole scope of the budget.
Okay. You got one more policy reading, right?
Actually, the approval of the resolution for the line of credit.
Oh, sorry. All right, line of credit. Take them as you want them.
Okay, thank you. We've been discussing that the legislation for this next year is not complete. And so you've been hearing about a government shutdown. I'm sure that's been on the news, and you've been hearing about that. If that were to happen and they were to shut down the government, that would mean that we would have a delay in our state aid payments. We wouldn't receive them. And we probably, because the district has been very diligent in building up a fund balance, most likely the district could make it through the month of July because we do have a fund balance. And that's one of the reasons why you have a fund balance for that rainy day kinds of things. And this is a perfect example of where it's important to have that fund balance. However, if it were to continue longer, or they make some decision, because we don't know what that is, and it impacts our budget, that we need to borrow money, this would give us an option. A line of credit would give us an option to do that. A line of credit allows us, and I've sent out an email to the entire board in the past, but what it does is it allows us to borrow up to 45 days, up to 90% of our average expenditures for the year, which is a pretty significant amount of money. It's a short a term, 45 days, and the interest rate is somewhere between 2 and 2.5%. And because it's such a short time period, it really allows us to be flexible, to borrow it and pay it back right away. Our interest expense is less. And so it's an option for the district to move forward. In the past, the district has utilized what they call aid anticipation certificates, where you borrow against the future aid that you will receive. And that is also an option that the district has. I'd just like to have available for the district both options. So if we were to need some additional fund cash, that we would have both of those options on the table for the Finance Committee and the board to make some decisions moving forward.
Okay.
This does not mean that we will borrow money. All it is allowing you to open a line of credit so it allows you to use it if you want to. It does not mean that you are using it right now.
Okay, before we open this up for discussion, do I have a motion to approve authorizing a line of credit?
I'll make the motion.
By Mike, second.
I'll second.
By Stacy. Any questions or discussion? Tom?
If after 45 days, let's say the legislature still hasn't resolved the difference, can you extend it 45, or would you go to aid anticipation?
You can extend it 45 days.
But if they goes way beyond what anybody thinks it's going to, what do you do after that? Can you change it to aid anticipation?
Yes, you can always borrow aid anticipation certificates. When you borrow aid anticipation certificates, it's for a longer period of time, and you also have issuance costs. And so I'm trying to give the board enough options so maybe they wouldn't have to pay those issuance costs. The unknown is the reason that I like the flexibility of the line of credit, because if it is resolved and we don't need it, we're not borrowing money that we don't need to borrow. It just opens, again, that option for the district.
What size line are we looking at?
I was just going to ask that question. Go ahead.
Well, you can take it.
Well, I think I was going to ask that question. I was wondering, you said 90% of what we need, would this line of credit, would we borrow immediately to that if we needed to borrow?
No,
Or
I
can we
would
work
not
up to it?
recommend that. What I would do is bring our cash flow analysis to the finance committee. We would review it and find out what the need is for the following 45 days and borrow the amount that we needed to have on hand to make our commitments and pay our bills, pay payroll. And then after that point, if we, if we needed another finance committee to make the decision, do we need to borrow it for an additional 45 days and how much that would be, you could continue to do that. You definitely would not need to borrow the whole amount.
But
And I
tonight
would not
we're-
recommend that.
Okay, but tonight we're approving that you have that flexibility to do what you need to do every 45 days,
If we need to.
if we need to.
And if we don't need to borrow it at all, then there's no cost to the district
Okay.
at all.
So I guess my question would be, what type of ceiling are we looking at for the line of credit? And do you know the institution that we would be working
Associated
through?
Bank, it's through we currently work with Mintrust, and Mintrust has an agreement through Associated Bank that we would borrow those funds.
Okay.
So back to that. So the point here is just basically that if we find ourselves here in a month, we've at least got all the paperwork in
Yes.
hand so that you can literally go the next day and say,
Yes,
wire some funds here.
we're trying to be prepared.
Right. But there's no cost to even process the paperwork, so they only get paid by the interest that they charge.
Correct.
Okay.
There is a one-time fee. If we do utilize the funds, there is a one-time initial fee to utilize that.
But again, that's only if we use it.
It's only if we use it.
Okay. And I think for historical, especially the new board members, I want to say it was probably well over $100,000 in the past that we paid in interest when we did use aid anticipation certificates. And I know Eric was always gristled on that, as did I. I mean, because that's money that's not being used for the kids, whatever purpose it may be. And so I think I applaud this as a hopefully we don't have to do it, but I think it's, even if we do, it's a better solution than the aid anticipation certificate. So I appreciate you bringing this forward to us.
And like I said, it's an option.
Yep.
And we can make a decision as we know more on June 20th, if we need to at that point, or even in July, if we need to call a meeting.
And I think when we get to the June 27th meeting, we'll know a lot more. If the legislature has finished their work by then, this becomes moot, if they, hopefully. And if they haven't, then we know we've got that 45-day window. We also know then that the Finance Committee will be meeting in July to look at what those options are as we move through the period where the shutdown would happen, and probably would meet more than once a month. There might be a few meetings to have to make sure that the Finance Committee and the board are in the loop as far as what should we do and how should we do that. So it'll be a heightened awareness and role of our Finance Committee as we move through this period.
Okay. One more quick question, Julie. You talked about going to the Finance Committee. What are the controls around drawing down so that the board understands how money is flowing in and out of that account?
We definitely would come to the Finance Committee to say, what are we comfortable with borrowing for those 45 days? We would review those expenditures in those 45 days and the amount of money that the district anticipates being short. So if we think about $4.5 million is a month's payroll and we're not receiving any funding from the state, as you've seen on our slide, our fund balance isn't quite that high, so we definitely would need to borrow some money at that point. And so we would look at what those expenditures are and I think as a district at the Finance Committee, there'd be some determination made as to what is that need, and then that recommendation would come to the board to say we would borrow that. After that money is borrowed, we'd only pull down the amount that we needed and utilize that to pay those bills, and at the end of 45 days, pay that back. And that money could only go into the general fund bank account that we have for the purposes of paying payroll and our liabilities.
Any signatures by the treasurer or anyone else on the board? I mean, because the Finance Committee traditionally has not had the authority to approve anything without full board action. It's been...
But we would come to the board as a whole also. I'm sorry. We would come to the Finance Committee, make a recommendation to the board as to what that amount would be. So definitely it would be board action that we would make that decision.
Okay. Yes,
Well, I guess by the 20th, then, that Finance Committee, you might be able to come up with some estimates of our cost, whether we use aid in anticipation or this line of credit.
If I have, like I said, I think it was when I look at our cash flow, we possibly would not need it even if there was a government shutdown in July, because we do have a fund balance. It's only if we really were to move into August and that would continue and not receive funds. My guess is, and I'm hoping that if there was a government shutdown, that they would be able to still make our state aid payments to us. But, you know, I can't guarantee that.
My thinking here is to let our elected representatives know that their inaction is causing us a cost.
Oh, absolutely.
So if we get that number.
It would be a
That
cost
might be
all
helpful.
across the state of Minnesota for many areas, not just school districts.
just for disclosure, I feel like I should abstain from voting this evening due to potential conflict of interest. So, are there any other questions or comments?
Julie, I guess, I have
Yes.
one. How does the state pay us? Do they pay us monthly? I don't.
Our payments are metered. So we received 70% of our funds in the first year. Well, 30%, that's that shift that they recently implemented. And it's metered. So we, depending on the time of year and the month it is, we receive more money and less money. Not only are state aid payments metered through the Department of Ed, but also our federal payments are metered as well. Our food service payments are metered to us. And we also receive our levy twice a year, November and May, from the county.
Okay. Seeing no other questions or comments, this is a roll call vote. Todd?
Aye.
Oh, wait, we had a motion and a second, right? Okay. Rich?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
I'm abstaining. Stacy?
Aye.
And Tom?
Aye.
That motion passes 6-0-1. Thank you. And you had a policy to go through?
Yes, if you'd like to hear one more thing.
Well, it's your meeting.
It is, I feel that way. The fund balance policy, as we've talked about, the GASB 54 is requiring us to make changes in the naming of our fund balance definitions, and so therefore we need to update our policy to comply with those GASB 54 requirements. We did adjust, and I did meet with the policy committee, and we discussed this, and I believe all of you received this and the differences and the changes. The purpose, the first line of our purpose really remains the same from what we had in the past, the current board policy, but the remainder of that paragraph does change, setting forth those changes in the definitions. And all the definitions change, from non-spendable fund balance, restricted fund balance, committed fund balance. We have discussed this in the past in our finance committee and as a whole board. Our non-spendable fund balance, and as you can read, include those amounts that we can't spend, either prepaid or their buildings, those kinds of things that we just can't spend, but they are showing as assets on our books. Our restricted fund balance, that's the easiest one. It's our it means our reserve fund balances, but they're renaming it restricted. The intent of this is so that it makes it easier for our public to understand. And so I think it's kind of one of those comical things where it's a big change for everyone. We just got used to our current definitions and they changed them for us. And so instead of it being reserved, it's now called restricted. Our committed fund balance are those in the past that the board has designated funds, such as for the opening of Red Tail Ridge and those types of things for our cash flow. Those now become committed, and those funds require a board action in order to commit the funds, and it also requires a board action to spend those funds and uncommit them. Assigned fund balances, we've had discussed this, and this is where the board authorizes either myself or Dr. Groover or both of us to be able to assign some funds. And the reasoning behind that is if we have carryover funds for each year that we allow our principals to carry over funds or our departments from year to year, that you allow us to be able to assign those back to those departments for the following year. And if you allow us to do that, it doesn't require a board action to go through that. It's just a matter of policy that we're able to do that. And then, of course, our unassigned fund balance used to be our undesignated fund balance, and so it's now called unassigned. I did talk a little bit about committing the fund balance and assigning the fund balance. One of the things I would like you to take a look at is on page 41, if you're looking at that, the minimum unassigned fund balance. This comes directly from our current policy. That did not change, talking about that the district would like to have a 5% to 8% fund balance, and what happens if it falls below that fund balance of 5%, and what happens if we do go above the 8%. That's current wording in our current policy. Any questions on this? One of the reasons that this is being brought forward is because it does need to be implemented for the current year. And so for our June 30th, it's the end of our current fiscal year, and so to have it approved so that our audit is correct.
Any questions on the policies presented? Yes.
I would just say that this has been to the policy committee, knowing that it will go back to now the finance committee for more thorough understanding and review. If there are changes that need to be made, it will come back to the policy committee at their next meeting prior to the 27th of June to fit within the time frame that we need due to the new language that they've just given us on GASB 54. So we'll have finance and policy prior to the next and the final reading.
Yeah, I think my only comment was I think the categorization of some things was a little bit, I don't know if confusing is the right word, but I think there was confusion, at least on my part, when we looked at this a couple of weeks ago. So I would appreciate the opportunity to maybe kind of revisit that, because I think at least one or two of those, I don't know that when the Finance Committee suggested those that we intended that they be as fixed as what the committed description lays out as opposed to the assigned categorization. So I think that would be fair to look at. And I know there's also a couple other areas. One in particular that I'm thinking about are the years when we don't have as many teachers retire as what we budgeted for, but we don't want to lose sight of those funds because they are going to eventually retire. And so I know that was one that I believe we've talked about that would be good to kind of make sure that we don't spend those dollars and then all of a sudden find ourselves looking for those funds in future years. So,
right.
So I think this would be a good exercise for the Finance Committee along with the board to look and kind of think through what are those different buckets that we want to kind of make sure that we've got visibility to.
And that definitely can be accomplished, but it doesn't necessarily have to be accomplished at the beginning of this whole process. Sure. So you can commit those funds at any point as a board. You can make that decision to commit those funds.
So you're saying with the new policy, if we find a month later that we have something in one category that really we believe belongs in another, we can change that at any time?
And you can make a new category to commit funds for a specific purpose at some future point in time.
Okay. Any other questions? And then this will be on the agenda for the Finance Committee on the 20th.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Superintendent's report.
We are very excited about graduation and the end of school next week. On January 10th is our graduation at Prior Lake High School at Dan Pence Stadium. And of course, the community is invited and welcome to join us as we celebrate our 500 graduates that will be crossing the stage. So we're wishing for very warm weather. Tonight would be just perfect. And this will be outside unless the weather is inclement, and it hasn't been so far, so we're going to hope that it stays as nice as it is tonight. That's it.
Okay. Any other administrative reports? Any board committee reports? Okay. Last day of school is June 9th, commencement June 10th, 7:30, Dan Patch Stadium. Finance Committee at 5 o'clock on June 20th. Dan Patch Days, we're selling tickets on Saturday, June 25th. Contact Martha Hoover to schedule some time if you can volunteer. We have a board study session on the 27th at 5 p.m. and then our regular board meeting following on the 27th. So, yes.
One other item I'd like to add, June 7th, ALC graduation.
Thank you.
There's a banquet.
Yep. How many students, Joanne?
We have 31 students that have finished and completed the requirements for graduation at our ALC this year.
Good, thank you. Is there any other events or any other business that comes before the board this evening? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Mike, second by Stacy. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Did we make it, Mike? Did we make it?
Almost.